Fourth time's the charm, right? I'm pretty sure that's how the saying goes. And no, I'm not counting unreleased movies because it ruins my opening gag. How's it going, everyone? My name's Graham and welcome to Two Left Frames. After enduring years of weak fan casts on Twitter, I'm going to do my best to assemble a cast that doesn't feel totally embarrassing, but probably still a little. However, it's unlikely I can do any better than this. That should really be our gold standard here. Something that I thought would be fun to include right at the top of this video is one specific wishlist item of mine for this movie. I know a lot of people have strong opinions on things as to whether or not this movie is set in the 60s and they're sent to the future or the present time, however they want to handle that. I'm actually not all that concerned. That's far less important to me than embodying the spirit and sense of adventure of those 60s to 80s sci-fi movies. I will say, however, that I do want this to be an origin movie of some sorts. I understand fully why when rebooting Spider-Man and the Hulk, they kind of jumped past that, but it's been so long since the first Fantastic Four movie, and we should all just forget the reboot ever happened. So absolutely, I want this to be an origin film, and I want to see that done well with the MCU's team. But even more importantly than that, I want to see some badass costumes. More and more costume designers are embracing comic-accurate costumes. Back in the 2005 movie, they looked fine, but you can tell it's a product of its time and maybe doesn't look that good these days. But I think they had the right idea, being a little bit more minimalist with it. I also understand why they did prototype costumes in the attempted reboot, but they're all just kinda crappy. And now in Multiverse of Madness, it's kinda going the right direction, but feels pretty over-designed. Also, somehow, String Bean Jim Halpert was kinda just too buff for the costume, and so for lanky elastic Reed Richards, he kinda just looks like a rectangle.
Jim, you're 6'11", and you weigh 90 pounds. Gumby has a better body than you. Boom. Roasted.
For once, it's an actor who I think could actually stand to lose a little muscle in order to believably play a character. It's just not a great fit, and I really hope that they put that outfit in its own corner universe and don't use it for the mainline Fantastic Four. We've already seen their blue and black costumes done reasonably well, and then attempted again here, and it looks eh. What I really want to see is the blue and white costumes, or some iteration thereof. I think it just looks kinda flashy and would help it feel distinct from any previous iterations. I hope they take influences from things like Spider-Man Homecoming, having the material feel more form-fitting, more elastic, not overly textured, or something like the Suicide Squad movie, where the costumes felt straight out of the comic books. Lean on what's worked well about those movies and uniforms, and I think they could do something really, really special here. So outside of the cast themselves, those are a couple things I'm just looking forward to, and I'm really curious to see how they unfold. With that out of the way, let me talk a little bit more about the Fantastic Four at large and what I hope to see from the cast themselves. The Fantastic Four is one of Marvel's oldest and most iconic franchises, dating back to 1961. But in all that time, Marvel's first family has never been under the stewardship of Marvel and Kevin Feige, who has very vocally expressed his love for the franchise and his desire to make a faithful adaptation. Even though the audience's trust in the MCU is probably at an all-time low, it's hard not to be excited about that potential. And it's being directed by Matt Shakman, who is responsible for what was, in my opinion, the best part of Marvel's Phase 4. WandaVision. Despite the larger cosmic scale and spectacle of these stories, I think through the core themes of family, there is a lot of potential for this film to be more intimate and emotional. So I really think Shakman was a great choice for the job. Plus Doom. Doom, please, give Doom. Must have Doom. Well, honestly though, I'm kind of torn on that. I don't want them jumping the gun on introducing Doom, especially when they're right in the middle of doing Kang. But now, given recent headlines, I really don't know if they're gonna recast or pivot away from that. And it kind of feels like they have to introduce Doom ahead of Secret Wars, so we'll see how everything pans out. I actually made a similar video about 5 years ago when Disney's acquisition of Fox was brand new. I kinda can't believe it's been that long already. I cast a few actors that have now appeared as other characters in that time. And a few of those picks no longer feel that strong to me for a variety of reasons. For example, Richard Madden is now Icarus, and Wyatt Russell is John Walker, so I guess they're out? And much more unfortunately, I had Ansel Elgort in the mix. Yikes. So let's just scrap that list and start over. Fox's most recent attempt made use of a younger iteration of the Fantastic Four. I think I would personally prefer to see them cast in their early to mid-30s, with Johnny being in his mid-20s. Have him at an age range where he can kick it with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Then these actors can stick around and play these characters for 20 years if need be. But on the inverse of that, Marvel has had a large influx of young new heroes recently, so maybe they want to lean a little bit older for this crew. To be safe, I'll be doing what I did last time, putting together two castings, one that leans younger and one older. I wanted to be really careful about not just selecting 4 actors who fit the bill of each respective character, but a collection of 4 actors who are age appropriate relative to one another and who will fit together well for the central relationships. I'm hoping for a believable romance between Reed and Sue, a fun sibling dynamic between Sue and Johnny, and having a pair of best friends for Reed and Ben. There is so much more layering of personalities to consider than in most fan castings. On top of that, I wanted to honor Ben's Jewish heritage and Doom's Romani descent. All those considerations made this very challenging, but also very fun. So let's dig into it. I figure we start with the leader of the team, Mr. Fantastic himself, Reed Richards. This actor will be incredibly important for centering the rest of the cast around. He needs to have the presence of someone who is fairly unequivocally the smartest man alive, with natural leadership qualities. He should be well liked, respected, and generally admired by his teammates. Reed's a pragmatic guy and is often put in a position to make tough calls, but that drama is balanced with the fact that he's a little bit socially awkward. He's a genius like Tony, a leader like Steve, and a little bit of a geek like Bruce. I'm looking forward to seeing a balance of those qualities brought together into this character, mixed with his more serious nature. Reed Richards is quite literally a fantastic role and deserves a worthy actor. Looking younger first, my top choices had been Dev Patel or Rahul Kohli. Personally leaning towards the latter, but after months of speculation that Penn Badgley is being vetted for the role, I am finding that awfully hard to unsee. He's currently most well known for playing a creep on You, on the show You, not on You.
You pressed U, referring to me. That is incorrect. The correct answer is you.
But Penn is a much more versatile actor than that. He's been praised repeatedly for subtle facial expressions and body language, which would be really useful for someone who literally plays a rubber-limbed character. Badgley has shown he can balance humor, drama, and romance, an aspect of this movie I want to see played up. Marvel is more miss than hit with their romances, and it would be a crying shame if they whiffed on it with Reed and Sue. It's an excellent pick, and there's a reason that people have rallied behind it for these many months now. I had a much harder time pinning down an older casting for Reed Richards. There was a time where my ideal Reed would have been Billy Crudup, but I think at 54 years old, he's officially aged out of it. I'm instead gonna look to the early or mid-40s. I tossed a lot of names around, and I eventually discarded all of them when I came across the left field choice of Brandon Routh. Through both Superman and the Atom, he's shown he has the charisma and physicality to carry a superhero role. But I don't want to pigeonhole him by having him play either of those characters again with Reed Richards' name. I'd actually prefer to see him lean on his more dramatic chops like he did with the complex Daniel Shaw in Chuck, or his more comedic skills shown off when playing Todd in Scott Pilgrim. Reed is a leader and a tech genius, which overlaps very heavily with Superman and the Atom, so maybe that's too much similarity? But I feel like Brandon never got his due in either role. He belongs as a major leading man like Mr. Fantastic. and I think years of experience would have him well positioned to nail the character. Sue Storm is determined, confident, smart, strategic, compassionate, and is generally a voice of reason in the group. I've always loved the juxtaposition of someone who is that strong-willed having a superpower that results in them fading into the background. Balancing the toughness and tenacity of the character with her empathy and love makes Sue Storm absolutely wonderful. Sue and Reed need to be cast together. The easiest way to sell that chemistry would be to cast a real-world couple like John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. And while I do still love Emily Blunt for the role, I'm simply not convinced of Krasinski as Reed. Maybe Multiverse of Madness isn't fair to judge off since he likely filmed for something like 2 days on a green screen, but with that short tenure, he unfortunately didn't convince me. If they cast the two of them together, I would be more than happy with it. That could work. And I would cast Blunt without Krasinski, but I would not put Krasinski in the role without Blunt. So instead, I'm just going to look outside of that popular fan cast. I'm actually going to stick with my prior choice presented 5 years ago for the younger casting, putting forward Samara Weaving. Across roles like Ready or Not, 3 Billboards, The Babysitter, Guns Akimbo, and really everything else I've seen her do, she has shown what incredible range she has, checking off every individual box of what I'm looking for in Sue Storm. Marvel would be foolish to not try and land this rising star. And while I enjoy other fan castings I've seen like Jodie Comer or Ana de Armas, it's actually one of the few roles she gets fan cast in that I remotely can see, I still think Weaving is the right choice, and I fully expect that she'd play well off Penn Badgley. They just kinda have a shared vibe that I think would go well together. How about an older Sue? I was again tossing around several names, but once I landed on Brandon Routh, I realized I still liked my pick from last time yet again. I've been a fan of Eliza Coupe for years, and I think this would be a great role for her, especially if she was playing off someone with the physicality of Brandon. You'd have this big guy playing Reed Richards, and you'd still be fairly confident that Sue wears the pants. Eliza is most well known for playing tough, confident, intense characters. But in almost any one of those roles, she always has moments of greater emotional depth, pulling back from that hard exterior and showing us a more sympathetic side of those characters. I'd love for her to be able to show off more of her range, instead of leaning on her comedic chops more heavily, and instead using her typical tough exterior as simply a shade of her complete character, rather than the personality trait that is immediately at the forefront. I think it's an unexpected choice, and I believe Eliza would surprise a lot of people. Looking to Johnny Storm, it's quite fitting for someone who literally lights themselves on fire to be seen as a major hothead. The Human Torch is impulsive and competitive, but is also deeply protective of and loyal to his family. It's actually really funny to look back and realize how good the casting was of Chris Evans as Johnny. I'm still just super impressed how he could expertly play both bad boy Johnny Storm and Boy Scout Steve Rogers. I can't think of many other actors who have achieved that level of non-typecasting. Recently, I've seen names like Austin Butler and Paul Mescal being thrown around in the rumor mill, and while I think both are charismatic, talented breakout stars who could crush the role, I don't see either of them playing all that well off my Sue Storm castings. My personal top choice has become Rudy Ponco. I know, I just cast this guy as the Flash in my DC video, but I've been super impressed by everything I've seen him in, especially after researching that fan casting. Rudy's off-the-wall energy and magnetic personality, layering in more of that vulnerability beneath his confidence, is exactly what Johnny needs. And I mean, seriously, does this guy not scream annoying little brother? I would absolutely love to see this little punk ruffling the feathers of Samara Weaving's Sue, while also just being kind of a nuisance around the lab. He's just got those vibes that he plays up so well. However, I'm actually far more confident in my casting of a slightly older Johnny. Well, still aiming to keep him younger than his co-stars. I've had one highly favored pick in mind here for a while while now, and that was driven fully home after Top Gun Maverick. My top choice is Glenn Powell by a mile. This guy has proven he can play cocky better than almost anyone else out there. Combine that with his wit, charm, and consistently believable chemistry with his co-stars, and Powell is more than well suited for the role. I think he has a cheeky sense of humor with very precise timing that could be used to great effect to both annoy Sue and mess with Reed. Honestly, I probably should have centered the entire video around his casting, because Glenn Powell as Johnny Storm is the one I'm most adamantly rooting for. Last but not least, The Thing. Now, a funny thing about Ben Grimm is that ever since Michael Chiklis gave a fairly iconic turn as the character, everyone seems to want to cast big burly meatheads. But it's Ben's wry sense of humor and sarcasm that he uses as a coping mechanism, as well as his heart of gold, that have made him such a well-loved character all these years. It's not necessary to cast the human form of the Thing as some big bodybuilder. For all its faults, I actually really liked the casting of Jamie Bell in the role for the 2015 Fantastic Flop. It was an unexpected and fairly inspired choice. That's not who I'm going with this time, mind you, but credit where credit is due. We need a fearless actor to take on this role, someone who can play the fun-loving, loyal best friend, then turned into this tortured, sensitive, and self-conscious pile of rocks. It's a complicated role to tackle, while weighing out the many facets of the character, factoring in the age range, Jewish heritage, and chemistry with everyone else. One actor immediately and clearly rose above the rest for me. Bear with me here, I'm so uncertain if this will be controversial, but my top pick is Shia LaBeouf. Sure, he had a weird stretch there for a few years, but Shia got the help he needed and has returned a much more humble and focused actor. We've seen him tackle every corner of Ben's personality across his lengthy career, and having now gone through some fairly dark days himself, I believe he could bring an emotional weight to Ben Grimm that could be a perfect opportunity for Shia to return to leading roles, while also serving as the heart of this team. Shia is young, but he has a maturity to him that I think would be invaluable to this cast. I'm genuinely pretty excited about that fan casting, and it's one of the ones I'm most curious to hear from you what you think of it. I had a far more difficult time casting an older Ben Grimm, and I wanted to look outside the common choices of stocky actors or big dudes with gruff voices like Jason Segel or Seth Rogen. While I don't outright hate Segel in the role, and honestly think there's a lot of positives to that casting, I wanted to go a different route. For a giant rock character, let's cast The Rock. Pause for effect. Sorry, no, I'm joking here. No thanks. I just kinda lack confidence in this choice, so I'm delaying putting it out there. I would like to see Joseph Gordon-Levitt take a crack at Ben Grimm. I feel like I'm losing ya, so hear me out. He had so many great roles in the early 2010s, but changed gears to focus on other creative pursuits. And honestly, I kinda miss seeing this guy on the big screen in big blockbuster roles. Sure, he did a stellar job as the hourly dong in Glass Onion.
Amazing.
Well, what is that?
That's the hourly dong.
But I want to see his take on the friendly, sensitive, brave, goofy Ben Grimm. I actually have the most trouble picturing how his voice would sound coming out of a giant pile of rocks.
Hey! You think you got problems? You take a good look, pal. How bad could it be, right?
That was a little bit of problem with the casting of Jamie Bell as well.
Why?
I'm no good to you, to anyone. This is all my fault.
That we can agree on.
But I think Joseph has the range, talent, and willingness to push himself to bring something unique and cool to the role. Plus, you could basically just have him perform for a few short scenes in the movie, and then have him do voiceover work the way they do Bradley Cooper. That is, if he's too busy to take the role on fully. I would rather have someone on set with the other actors so they can all play off each other properly. And finally, looking to the villains, there have been recent rumors suggesting that Shackman wants to use Galactus and the Silver Surfer in this movie. Honestly, Galactus, the Silver Surfer, and Doom all feel like too much too fast for their first outing, but if I'm gonna do any of them, I've decided to limit myself to only casting Victor Von Doom. He's easily the most important villain to the Fantastic Four and one of Marvel's most important villains overall. This is a casting they absolutely need to nail. Victor is a genius like Reed, but is far more calculating, applying that intellect to schemes, deceit, and manipulations. He has an unshakable confidence in himself and his abilities, bringing about an overwhelming arrogance. Doom views himself as honorable, but often resorts to gratuitous violence. This prideful and tragic character needs a powerhouse actor to deliver the performance everyone wants and expects from the role. I love so many of the fan castings I've seen from the perspective of raw talent and well-suited traits. But I do think it's important to respect the Romani heritage of the character. And while researching this, there really aren't that many Romani actors working in Hollywood. On the younger side, I was tempted to go with Jesus Castro. And while I like his look and overall presence, I simply haven't seen him in anything, and his Romani heritage is actually only speculated. Really, the only age-appropriate Romani actor I know is Charlie Clapham. But again, I haven't seen him in more than like one thing. He has really actively pursued the role, and I've seen other fan casters out there support his bid. One of the most important qualities I've seen highlighted for Clapham is his willingness to collaborate and take on feedback. It sounds like actors, writers, and directors have all said he's willing to take risks in pursuit of making his performance more engaging and interesting, while taking and making use of notes given to him from those around him. And if he's willing to work closely with Shackman and others to shape the perfect Doom, then I'm down to give him the chance. Otherwise, they're likely gonna need to cast someone fairly unknown. My number one choice for Doom was once Rufus Sewell. He is one of the most brilliant actors out there and always shines as a villain. He's basically the one actor that would convince me to look outside of that Romani descent rule. However, he's probably too old for the role these days. And looking again to the Fancasting movie from 2015, I simply want to point out that I love Toby Kebbell as an actor. He deserves a shot at a role as big as Doom, but likewise, he is also not Romani. I have much more confidence overall for my older Victor casting than I did younger. I would go Dominic Raines. This guy has a $1 million smile and natural charm that I think would pair well with Brandon Routh as Reed, while also serving to disarm those around him. I love that he could bring some important physicality and intensity to Doom. His experience in live theater could add some important drama and gravitas to the performance, and through his skill with accents and displays of a wide emotional range, I think he could create a multi-dimensional portrayal of Doom that has the potential to stand up to some of the very best villains we've seen in any comic book movie. As long as they take the time and care to write the character in a way that provides enough space for Raines to play around in, then I think he would make a meaningful stamp on the character and the MCU at large. So there it is, my casting for the 5 main roles of the Fantastic Four, here showing you the younger first, and now showing the older actors as well. I just think it helps to show the full lineup of them to appreciate how those actors would come together and allow you to imagine them as a cohesive whole. I really enjoy doing fan casting videos, and I desperately hope that this one is released before any major reveals take place, because it kind of feels like it's coming any day now. But given that people have been fan casting these characters for so many years, I'm certain you all have suggestions of your own. I would love to hear some praise for some of my choices, but can understand if you want to tear them down entirely. It's really the fun of a fan casting, is kind of arguing it out after the fact and presenting your own lists. So I really look forward to seeing what everyone comes up with down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. I will have links in the end cards and the description down below to other comic book videos and fan castings I've done. I do exceedingly in-depth reviews of comic book movies, and would love if those got a few more views so we can talk about them together. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.